What is up guys, Delboy here. Today I will be bringing you a quick preview of the World Boxing Super Series card that goes down this weekend. Takes place at the CFE Arena in Orlando, Florida, the United States of America. Both of the bantamweight and cruiserweight divisions will be showcased. We will start with Emmanuel Rodriguez versus Jason Molony. Rodriguez is the IBF bantamweight champion. He won that title back in May against Paul Butler, and Jason Molony is, I believe, his mandatory challenger. Rodriguez is a guy who I've been aware of now for quite some time, maybe 2 to 3 years, but I first really researched him when the Paul Butler fight was announced, and as soon as I saw tape, I was convinced he was going to beat Paul Butler. I was sold straight away. I really am high on Emmanuel Rodriguez and his talent. Rodriguez is a guy who is very good at distance control. He's really good at managing the distance. His jab is wonderful. He varies it well from body to head. Sometimes he'll use a a ramrod jab. Other times he'll flick the jab. You know, his jab is really, it has variety. And I love the right hand behind the jab. I love his counter-punch abilities. Sometimes he'll lead with a left hook. He's got a nice sneaky right uppercut as well. You know, Rodriguez he's a really talented boxer. He's a really talented counterpuncher. He reminds me actually of a more dynamic version of Kell Brook. Certain things he does reminds me of Kell Brook. The way he stands, his stance, and how he controls range with the jab, and how he throws the jab, and how he throws straight punches. That reminds me of Kell Brook, but he just seems more dynamic. He seems more like he's got a few more tools in the toolbox. To me, Kell Brook is a bit jab right hand heavy, whereas Rodriguez has a few more tools in the toolbox. I think Rodriguez, he's a better combination puncher. His jab actually has more variety than Kell Brook. So I think overall he's like a better version of Kell Brook. That's how I see Rodriguez anyway. And as for Molony, I've seen a bit of Molony again before this tournament. I've got to confess, didn't really know too much about him, but I watched his fight with Koei Kono, and in that fight he actually displayed a couple of different fighting styles. So sometimes he was trying to box, keeping it at range, using his jab, using that right hand behind it, and at other times he was standing in the pocket with Kono and trading, and that actually kind of played into Kono's hands, but you know, Molony was still getting the better of it. So I was encouraged by how Molony in that fight wasn't really one-dimensional. He tried a couple of different things. You know, so I don't think Molony's a bad fighter whatsoever. I think he's tough. I think he's game. He carries respectable power. You know, he does everything pretty well, but he doesn't do anything exceptionally well. I really feel Rodriguez is a more talented fighter. I think he's a level above. And, you know, Molony can't afford to box with Rodriguez. I just can't see him winning that type of fight. I think he needs to apply pressure. The only issue with that is he's going to leave gaps for Rodriguez to counter. Molony coming forward does get hit. Koei Kono was tagging him quite a lot. And Rodriguez is a far better boxer than Kono, let's be honest. So if Molony is going to apply pressure, which he should do, he needs to tighten up on his guard coming forward, because in previous fights, coming forward, I've seen him get hit quite a bit. So yeah, he needs to make adjustments to his game going into this fight. But if Molony has like a granite chin, and if he can maintain a really high work rate and keep and actually drag the fight on to the later rounds, that would actually be interesting, because Rodriguez seems like a guy who, he's a rhythm fighter, and when he's on top he's going to look brilliant. But what happens when he's dragged into a tough fight? What happens when he's getting banged to the body? What happens when it's rough and tumble? We don't know the answers to these questions, but Molony needs to ask these questions of Rodriguez and see how he responds. But ultimately, I am picking Rodriguez to win this fight. I think he will outbox Molony to either a points win or maybe even a late stoppage. Ultimately, I think Rodriguez is just too talented. I am really high on him. And I actually don't think Molony's a bad fighter, but you know, I think Rodriguez will have too much. Maybe I'm wrong, but I just think Rodriguez is a level above. Also on the card in the cruiserweight tournament, we have Yunier Dorticos versus Mateusz Masternak. That is actually a really good fight. Both guys actually are quite offensive. Dorticos again, defensively leaves holes, but pretty quick hands for a cruiserweight. Very good punching power, and he's very aggressive. Also, I like the way Dorticos works the body. He's flawed, but he's a fun fighter to watch. And Masternak, again, he's a guy who's pretty flat-footed. He's been involved in some good fights already. He has a good work rate, good in the pocket, decent all-round skills, good solid European level operator. We saw Masternak a couple of years ago fight Tony Bellew, and that was a really tough fight for Tony Bellew. Bellew has actually been on record saying how tough that fight was. That fight was very close. Masternak has also recently beaten Kalenga. Kalenga is a decent cruiserweight. Masternak is no joke, but I think he's European level, whereas Dorticos is, I would say, lower world level. So I think Dorticos is going to win this fight, probably by knockout in the mid to late rounds. But a good fight, that should be fun while it lasts. I think Masternak will give Dorticos some issues, but ultimately Dorticos to me is too dynamic, and I think he'll take Masternak out in the mid to late rounds. But it's a good fight. Not too much else to look forward to on that card apart from Keith Tapia versus Mike Perez. Mike Perez is a funny fighter really because, he's clearly talented, but his career's never really got going. At heavyweight he was a bit, he was always in poor condition. Then there was the whole tragedy with Magomed, that he kind of went off the rails after that. He then came back to rededicate himself and actually jumped down to cruiserweight. He was in the last World Boxing Super Series, lost to Briadis in a horrible fight, and since then he's been inactive. Here we see him again against Tapia in basically a last chance saloon fight. So I think Perez should win that fight. Tapia is quite basic. He's like a regional fighter in the United States. He's a domestic fighter, but he's decent enough. That should be a decent fight, but I think Perez, he should have too much for Tapia, especially if he wants to get to world level. He needs to be beating Tapia, let's be honest about it. But yeah, Keith Tapia versus Mike Perez, that is definitely worth keeping your eye out for. But apart from the two main fights and the Tapia fight, there's not too much else on the card to really keep your eye out for. But I do think this is the best card so far of this season's World Boxing Super Series. I really feel the Dorticos versus Masternak fight will be fire. I think that'll be very good. What do you guys think of this card? Share your picks below. Peace.